I'm Jocelyn.
And I'm Danny.
And this is Why Can't We Talk About It? How's it going, Danny?
I am doing pretty good. I had a good night's sleep, so I am nice and awake and ready to have a chat and a discussion. How about you?
I'm good too. I just came back a little while ago now, but I'm still feeling refreshed from my vacation to Charleston and Savannah. So, you have that Mojorin post-vacation where you went away and you got a different perspective and everything seems just a little bit more optimistic. I need that at least for work.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Hold on. Did you say mojoring?
Mojoring?
What did you say at the beginning?
How's it going?
No, I just heard you say, when you need some kind of like mojoring and then a vacation, all that stuff. I thought you used a word I just never heard of before.
I have no idea.
Okay. I'll play it
you
back
should leave
later
this in.
listen.
Yeah.
Oh, no, for sure. Just leaving it in. I'm going to go back to it. But I was like,
I'm just saying different words.
Yeah. Well, I'm all for learning new things. So I thought, maybe she's using like a fancy ass word I never heard before. So I thought I'd ask.
I was just mojoring around and I'm feeling so much better for it. Yep.
Nice. Okay.
You also just mojored. You mojored to Antigua.
Okay, yeah, mojored.
I did not say that. I don't even know what that is. I'm now using it.
Okay.
Trying to be funny.
Yeah, I did. I was going to use that as my reco.
Okay, all right. Okay, then let's skip it. No, let's go right to the recos. Let me know.
All right. Well, my reco is that I went on vacation to Antigua. It is a little island down south. I was there for a week and it was amazing. We stayed at a nice little resort where it actually wasn't that busy, or I can't tell. I think it's just like a small resort. And so it always felt like we had access to like the beach and, we never felt like it was so busy that you couldn't find seats. The weather was great. It was like between 25, 28 degrees all week long. And, the food was nice. The people were nice. And I got to do some tours around the island just to kind of give context of how small this island is overall. Apparently, the population is around 90,000 people. So
it's tiny.
It's a very tiny place, especially when you consider how, in the city of Toronto, it's 3 million plus, I think. Maybe even almost 4 million people. So to be at a place where it's 90,000, that's everybody, was very different for me. It was a nice treat. But yeah, it was great. And it definitely was something needed, especially because we haven't been on vacation, I think, out of the country in over 4 years. So it was a bit of a trying to remember, like, okay, how does this work again in terms of like going to the airport, flying? Yeah. So that was, a nice little refresher, but it was good. It definitely was tiring just kind of getting there and coming back. But when I was there, you know what? It was nice. It's one of those things where you're there and it feels so nice and you're like, I wonder how much it costs to buy a place here so I can come here more often. Especially when, even on the beach, you're looking out and you're like, oh, I see some properties on the hill over there. They're just kind of like looking out to the water. Oh, okay. I wonder how much that costs. So yeah, no, it was really great. I don't know if for people who like to go there, I know for us, it's only like a 4-hour, 5-hour flight. And there were a lot of people that we met who were coming in from Europe. We met a few people from England. And obviously for them, I'm like, oh, your flight would have been like 10 hours or more, I think, just to come all the way down here. But they still made their way over. So clearly people want to go and enjoy themselves. And I was one of those people and it was great. So if anybody's looking for a place to vacation, Antigua is a place I think that's worth checking out.
Nice. Good travel rec.
Yeah. I mean, was your travel part of your rec? You want to add that, or is that just this is what you did?
I had a different recommendation, but I will go ahead and throw in Charleston and Savannah as my recommendation for anybody who wants to visit the South. They are two great cities. I love them both. I would say that Savannah is probably one of my all-time faves. In my list of top 5 cities, for sure, is Savannah. But I think it's worth doing both if you have the time and you're in the area. I don't know if people really know a lot about them. Savannah is definitely used as a place where a lot of movies are filmed and shows. It's just so beautiful. It's so unique. I've never been to a city like it. So anybody living in the States who doesn't want to get on an international flight, I think it's definitely worth your while. And even for my friends in Toronto, I don't think it's that far. I think it's probably only like maybe a 4-hour flight if I had to guess. Mm-hmm. So it's very cool. Yeah, definitely a good getaway. If you want to hit me up, I'll give you some travel recommendations. It's great.
Nice.
My actual recommendation this week is very fitting for our podcast. It's a book, obvi. Mm-hmm. It's called Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before by Dr. Julie Smith. And it's a quick read. It's also a no-nonsense, factual, and helpful guide to very common mental health issues like anxiety. I like it because it's very clearly written out with action items. So I have to say, it's nothing revolutionary. I haven't learned anything net new in this book that I haven't heard before, but it's the way that it's formatted and put together and so easily digestible that I think that anybody can read it. Everybody should read it. I think you might learn a little bit more about yourself by doing so. So for people interested in the topic, check it out. And for anyone that's sort of new to talking about things like anxiety or depression, I'd recommend that you give it as a gift. It's just a really great book.
All right. Thank you for that. It'll be in the show notes.
It'll be in the show notes.
Wait, hold on. When you said it was you said quick read?
Yeah.
How quickly did you finish this book?
I think 3 days.
Okay.
It's 368 pages. That's not that long.
I don't think that's a short read.
Okay, it's maybe an average read.
Oh, okay.
It's not a race. It's not a race. And listen, it's not a story, right? You can just like pick it up and look at a chapter. If you're like, oh, I want to read about like dealing with criticism. And then you just open the book up and take a look at that. Does that ever happen to you where you're like, you had a really crappy day and it's like a very specific thing that sets you off? If you're like, I received bad feedback today. Or you're like, somebody said this thing and it really bothered me. And then you Google like how to get over it when someone tells you something not nice. Instead of Googling it, you can just read a chapter from this book, which is very well researched and very practical.
I guess that does happen. Although for me, it's more like I'll be Googling like, why do I feel this way?
You don't Google like very specific things?
I'm sure I do. But I think I tend to go with the, why is this happening like from me? Not so much like, how do I fix what other people did? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. No, I meant like I will Google like upper lip sweat, how to fix when anxious.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there answers?
No, there isn't anything that I want to implement. No.
Oh, okay. Nice.
I mean, like in terms of like surgical interventions or like Botox or anything, I'm not going to do that. It's the usual, like, the underlying issue and fixing your anxiety, and it's not a quick fix.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to have a sweat mustache. That's just the way it is.
Well, sometimes the worthwhile fixes aren't that quick anyways, so that makes sense.
So true, Danny. So true.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that, Reco. And I'm sure
Let's
other
dive
people
in.
too. Yeah, let's dive in.
So, probably people are guessing what the topic of today's episode is because we took a rather long hiatus, and also the title is probably going to be something like Pressing Pause, or It's Not Goodbye, It's See You Soon, or something like that. But
Yeah.
basically, the gist of the episode is that I am stepping away from the podcast and we're going to see where it goes from here. Because even though I'm not going to be here with Danny to talk about hard things, I think that Danny, we can all agree, Danny does an excellent job of coming up with beautiful, brutal, hard topics to walk people through, and that people will leave the episodes feeling a little bit better. I don't think that that should stop, but I do feel like my time on the pod has come to a natural end.
Boo. I mean, no. Why?
I know. Well, we can talk about why, actually. I think that's why we wanted to jump on the pod and explain it instead of me just ghosting the listeners and you moving on like nothing had happened. Yeah, I think there's no event or catalyst that caused this, but when I told Danny about this, first of all, Danny's going to tell you about a dream that happened after I told this to him, which is heartbreaking. But in the moment when I told Danny my decision to step away, I don't think he could have handled it with any more grace. It was so generous because, you know, having a conversation like that's really hard. I was obviously feeling really torn up about it. It felt confrontational. It felt like I was letting somebody that I really love and admire down, and that's not ever an easy thing to do. Danny completely understood. One thing you said, Danny, was when I told you that I needed to take a break and step away, I said we could do like a transition plan, like I wouldn't need to leave you right away, but you immediately said, we can stop right now if you need to. And that was just, I can't even tell you how much that meant to me. It was so generous of you to immediately put yourself in my shoes and try to understand where I was coming from and not make me feel like complete shit over it. Because, you know, it wasn't something we had planned. So I'm sure it was completely out of left field for you, and you handled it like a true friend. A true friend.
Thanks. I mean, basically in my mind, I was like, all right, we're shutting it down.
No, I don't think, I mean, yes, I can understand why you would feel that way, but I personally think that you have so much to still give to the world. But we won't say any more on that because we don't actually know what the next steps are going to be for the pod. So I'm still going to be supporting Danny 100% with where this takes him. But let's steer it back to why I wanted to leave, because I think this is a good segue. I think, Danny, this was your fantastic idea and dream to start this podcast. And when we worked on it, I saw that same passion and excitement for it the same way that I felt when I started my blog back in like 2015. I loved working on this podcast with you just as much as you love to produce it. But I think that it really was, I think, like your dream the first time you had worked on creating something new and putting it out into the world.
Yeah.
For me, I've been doing that for a while now. And I don't know, there's just been a shift over the past year where I've wanted to share less. For anybody who reads my blog, they'll know that I've posted more infrequently. I pulled off of socials a few years ago. I used to write a newsletter. It wasn't even to like that long of a subscriber list, but even that, I pulled back on. And I haven't fully explored the reasons why I'm not as open anymore, but I think it's not a negative thing. I think there are two parts to it that I've kind of looked into. I think the first one is I've read the term vulnerability hangover, which is where when you share and you are being vulnerable in a public setting, you can afterwards maybe feel embarrassed about it, feel some shame about it, feel like, ugh, why did I talk about that? I wouldn't go so far as to say that I feel ashamed or embarrassed about anything we've talked about. I don't regret anything that we've talked about on the podcast, but I will say that it has been harder for me. So it used to be pretty easy for me to like write and put things out there. And now it just feels like giving a piece of myself away. I can't necessarily articulate it as well as I want to, but it's just harder for me to open up. And I don't see it necessarily as a bad thing because from a mental health perspective, I actually feel more happy and more stable. And I've been this way for a more consistent period of time. I think this is quite honestly the best I've ever felt. Probably like, I've obviously probably felt like more happy and carefree before I started working in the corporate world and it sucked my soul away and tries to every day. But I guess I'm back in a place where I'm not letting that happen. I feel very me. I feel like the most me that I've felt in a long time. So there's just been a natural shift over the past year where maybe it's like the better I've felt, the less I give out on these public platforms. I've definitely made a lot of time in my life for people I love. My friends, Danny, you and I still have our catch-ups outside of the podcast recordings. Like, I really get a lot of fulfillment from that one-on-one time or hanging out with my family or in friend groups. I don't know. I guess I don't know what it is that I feel like I don't need anymore from sharing publicly, but it's sort of fallen away. Whereas I think, Danny, for you, we've been doing it for a year, and I think it's still fresh and new, and I think that you do have so much to explore and so much to put out there that it's different. We're just on different parts of our creating content journey. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so that definitely makes sense. Let me kind of go through my point of view and my experience in terms of when Jocelyn mentioned that to me. And I think that was probably, by now, it's like 2 months ago. And she told me actually just before we were recording one of the episodes. Yeah, of course, that was quite the shock to me and the surprise. And I remember when it happened, I was just like, oh man, because we had just been kind of recording more consistently at that point. And, you know, we come a long way, I think, in terms of just finding our groove of what that's all about, of what to do and, you know, our scheduling and getting things done. So when you said that, I was like, oh man, things are going so well and you kind of need to step away. However, when you explained to me why, I was like, oh, okay. I remember the biggest thing that kind of stood out to me was when you kind of helped explain to me that you've been doing content creation, being online, blog, newsletter, all that, which I knew you've been doing since like 2015. So when I put it into that kind of context, I thought, okay, well, I've just been doing this for at most a year. You know, in terms of actually putting out stuff, it's only been since September. But obviously, yes, in terms of, you know, idea, putting it together, all that stuff, it's been about a year now. Whereas for you, if you kind of count it since 2015, that's like 8 years worth of doing stuff. In my mind, I was like, oh, she's been doing stuff for a long time. And I think when you explain it to me too, in terms of just doing all that, plus, you know, what you got going on in your life, work, what's on your plate, kind of made a lot of sense to me. And so it's not like for you to say that I was necessarily upset or anything like that, but I was kind of bummed out, I think, just because of how things were going. And in my mind, I was like, oh, things are going great. Like, what else can we do with this? And just having ideas for that. And then I think for you to be like, oh, I'm actually going to step away now. I'm like, well, that sucks. And so when you told me that day and we were still recording and everything, like even as we were recording as normal, I remember just feeling a bit sad about it, a bit bittersweet about it. Even when we were done, I remember actually telling you, like, yeah, honestly, Jocelyn, like, as we were recording, I remember feeling a bit bummed out about it. It's a bit sad to be like, oh, we finally got to this point, and then you have, you're thinking, or you want to leave. However, when you explain it, I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think that's why, too, even at the time, I was like, if you want, we can just shut it down now and then kind of just see what happens. However, I think you were very gracious and like, no, it's okay. We can, maybe step back a bit, try to figure out a new schedule, and then kind of continue from there. And then you'll kind of be there to help me, support me, depending on what I can think of going forward. From that, and I guess just, taking time off and things, that's why I think it's taken so long for us to finally get together and record this. So for that part, I look at it and I think, okay, so you're going to step away, totally fine by me. It was a nice run, I think is how I would kind of look at it too. But at the same time, I look at that and I go, well, I wouldn't really have done any of this really unless you were on board in the first place. Even if it's something where like, yeah, it kind of sucks because I do enjoy the way the setup is and the way the format is for this podcast, to being able to do these things and have these conversations with you and discuss things. And I'm like, well, I don't really talk about this with anybody else. It's been, a great run. But I remember too, it's like, oh, it's thanks to you and the support from it that I could even do all of this, and what I gained from it and what I learned from it. It took that to get to here. So I don't know if it's something along the lines of like helping me build a foundation in which I can maybe see where this takes and where it goes from here. That's something where I look at and I go, oh, it's thanks to you. Otherwise, none of this really realistically would have happened. Having said that, though, let me share the dream that I had. So that night, after Jocelyn told me about it, I remember we recorded. I told her like, oh man, I'm really bummed out. And then we hung up. And I remember just kind of sitting there for a while after we hung up. I was like, well, I guess, that makes sense. She gave a good explanation and, I get it. But man, what timing. That's definitely a surprise and a shock for me. As I was saying, I was like, oh, I did feel, a bit sad about it, a bit bummed out about it. We'll see. Maybe we'll, do this every few weeks, or we'll figure out a new schedule. So that night I go to sleep and then I had this dream. I've already told this to Jocelyn before, but one thing I'll say is I'm not saying this dream, or I'm not telling her this dream because I'm hoping like, oh, she'll feel bad about it or anything like that. It was more of when I had this dream, I was like, ooh, I think I learned something about myself. So this dream that I had basically was, if you picture young Danny, maybe around 9 years old, I'm at my parents' place and I'm just, on the first floor, right when you walk into the front door, and I'm just playing with, I had some toys or some toy cars, and I'm just kind of like chilling by myself. And near me, there was, I guess it wasn't my mom, but I knew it was a mom figure. And she was having like an argument with this other person who I think in the dream was an uncle figure. So I was just playing with my toys, and off to the side, I knew they were kind of arguing about something. And then what happens next was that they kind of just start leaving the house. They both leave, and I'm alone in this house now. I call up the mom, so I give her a call, and she picks up but doesn't say anything. And I just go, well, where did you go? Like, why did you leave the house? And why did you both have to leave? Like, why couldn't just one of you go? And she didn't really say anything back. So I was just kind of asking her the questions. And then I guess I hang up. And then the uncle figure, he happens to come back to the front door. And he kind of opens the door a little bit and he peeks his head in. And I see him and I look at him and I go, where did you guys go? Why did you both leave? Why am I by myself now? Why couldn't one of you guys go? What are you doing? He just kind of looks at me. I look at him and he doesn't say anything, but I can tell he feels bad. And I could tell by the expression of his face that he feels bad. He doesn't say anything. So then I just look at him and I kind of yell out, I'm like, you're abandoning me. And then he looks at me and I can tell in the dream that he gets even more sad looking. And I just kind of yell out again, I'm like, you're abandoning me. And he kind of like puts his head down and I could tell he feels bad. He turns away though, and he still continues to leave. And he closes the door and walks away. And I'm by myself. And one more time, I just yell out, abandoning. And then I wake up. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm pretty sure I know where that came from.
Oh, how symbolic.
How symbolic indeed. So I remember that morning too, I think I had a therapy session as well. So I remember when the session started, my therapist is asking like, oh, so what do you want to talk about? Anything new happened, this week? And I'm like, yeah, I got a fresh one for you. This happened a few hours ago. So I learned, let's see, what did I learn from that? Well, I guess the idea of Jocelyn leaving, given what we worked on, I think when she was telling me that, she's like, yeah, I want to step away, which again, fine. It makes sense based off the circumstances. But that probably triggered something in me. There's some kind of abandonment. I don't know what it's called, but I guess it's that idea like, oh, being abandoned. That probably manifested into a dream that I had where there's the young part of me probably dealt with some stuff that I didn't even really conscious of. That experience of Jocelyn being like, oh, I'm leaving, triggered some stuff. I found that very interesting. I mean, looking back in the moment, I was like, whoa, what was that? Looking back on it and being able to kind of look into it some more, I'm like, ooh, that's actually very interesting and brought some awareness for me. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I just thought I'd share that because I never really had anything so direct, like something happens and then having a dream about it. And I'm like, whoa, as symbolic as it is, it's very direct cause and effect, I think, for me. So yeah, that's what happened.
I think part of that just goes to show you how meaningful it is for you to be able to create content that matters and that makes a difference. And so for it to change, I didn't say end, I said change. So for it to seemingly go so well and then have to veer in a different direction, that is a scary feeling. And I don't think that it would have happened if this podcast didn't mean so much to you. And I think that we get so much wonderful, lovely, honest, brave feedback from people that it is maybe not validating. Well, in a way it is, but it also is motivating. I think that's the word that I wanted, right? Like, this is why you started it. You literally told me, I want to talk about the things that we just never talk about. For us to do that and then to get feedback from people saying, I'm so glad that you talked about this. I think it just shows you exactly why you wanted to start this in the first place. And you do have so much to share. So I think it's a natural response. Although I would never abandon you, Danny.
Thanks.
Never. Yeah, it shows you how important this is. I also want to tell you that we make a great team, but you're selling yourself short because even if you did this on your own, it still would be wonderful I think it's good that we worked together on this. We work well together, obviously. We worked on a team, like literally in real life. So we were building off each other's strengths. I lit a fire under our butts with our Notion board. You got very tech savvy and looked into all the recording stuff. It worked out well, but I think that you would have made it happen in one form or another. But I am honored that we got to do it together, and I am so proud of you, and I'm proud of us and the 20 episodes that we put out there. I think we worked really hard. We worked really hard on them, and to know that it mattered to people, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is. I've never really done I guess I'll call this a project in the sense where it's like most of the stuff I've done in the past, even just work-wise, is like, oh, what's happening today? What's going on? There was never really a place where it required me to think about work long-term and to put it in work so that something will come out like a product later on. I think the amount of time that we spent to do all that prep-wise before actually even launching and recording and publishing was an experience that I just really didn't know what to do. So I do appreciate the kind words in terms of you saying like, oh, I'm kind of selling myself short. But I do feel like you brought a lot of skill and experience to this, where I remember at the very beginning, I was like, okay, well, I have some ideas. Here's my Word document. And you're like, there's a Notion board and there's other things online, and you don't have to send me a Word document by email. Times have changed. And I remember when you explained that to me, I was like, oh wow, they have all these cool things now. Yeah, I felt so like outdated when I was sending you my items.
Hey, you knew about that. We used to use Trello together, remember?
Still, it's just my go-to was like, hey, here's my attachment on my email. Here's a Word document. Have a look. Thanks.
We both brought our own skills. Getting shit done is definitely my superpower.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I just, I guess the point of today's episode was to get that information out there, especially for those people who I know I've been asked like, oh, what's happening? Because it's been a while. We had a, pretty consistent schedule, and I think there's a big gap. So I think hopefully this explains it. It's definitely a pause. I think I have ideas of what's going to happen next. Not really sure. I'm pretty sure I'll run that by Jocelyn and be like, what do you think? But I think it's important for me to just, address and acknowledge that like, hey, Jocelyn is going to step away. I think that's fine and cool for what she wants to do. And I totally understand, especially when she explains why she wants to do so. But I just want to thank you again. It's definitely an experience that was worth the time. And I can't really say that for everything. So to say like, yeah, this was worth the time, the effort, and all those things included is a very big deal to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Danny. I think if the listeners have feedback, if they want to give us some ideas of where this could go, we're open to that. Hit us up on email, on Instagram, or whycan'twepodcast@gmail.com. Why Can't We Podcast? Take a look and let us know what you think. But I think we can all agree that Danny is going to make a difference in people's lives. And I'm so grateful for what we've done together, Danny, and I'm just so very proud of you.
I'm proud of us.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
All right. Since we are having a pause now and Jocelyn is stepping away, I would like to give her the honor of signing off to us.
Okay. Well, listeners, tune in next time. Bye.
Bye.